Welcome to the CodePlay Culture Podcast, where we discuss tech, gaming, health, and the world around us.
Welcome back to CodePlay Culture. Logan, Rui, and Chris, we are back at it again after a small hiatus, having fun, changing the world, one person, organization, and group at a time. Rui, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good, man.
And Chris, what's up?
Doing awesome. Sorry, I cut you off there, Rui.
No, I was just gonna go on like I usually do, but Chris, go ahead.
Oh, no. Hi, how are you? It's a great day.
So,
what are we talking about today, Logan?
Ransomware, because it's close enough to Halloween. By the time this airs, it might be exactly on the scary day.
Well, it's a scary day anytime you hear about it, but yeah.
Yes. So it's been a reoccurring theme for people that are not in the cloud. If you have, let's say, SQL data on-prem, let's say you have a lot of databases on-prem, they can encrypt that and then say, okay, we will decrypt it for you for 20 grand. Some companies pay the 20 grand right away. Okay. But then sometimes it gets really bad where they encrypt the databases, many of them, the local files like, shared drives. And they also say, okay, now 500,000, 500,000. And at that point, you check backups and you're like, oh, all the backups online have been messed up too. If it's virtual machines, sometimes they completely take those offline. This is a scary thing. And I have not seen ransomware of the cloud more than I have seen ransomware on-prem.
That's interesting. So you're suggesting the cloud is more ransomware, I guess,
Proof?
safe?
Yeah, or it's easier to hide behind the SLAs of Microsoft than it is to say, I'm going to have my own data center, secure it as if I was Microsoft. But people can't afford to lift and shift the entire server closet. What I'm saying is it's probably a good idea to synchronize some of your data to Azure, or to keep some of your backups offline, disconnected from any existing systems that can access them.
I mean, so you get what you pay for, and if you're using Azure or AWS or any of the other, Oracle or something, I mean,
yeah,
they've got the highest level of training. They're in the know on this stuff because any type of attack like that is going to be very high profile and really undermine their entire business, right? So they're going to be on the ball with that stuff. So yeah, you have to pay for those services, and they're not cheap, but
but they can still be affected.
Paying ransomware.
Right?
Yeah,
they can still be affected by this by ransomware.
I think too, and you guys are more experts on it. I love your take on this, but it's one thing to just unlock your database, but they still stole all your crap and they're going to use it to their advantage. They're not saying we're never going to use your data. We're going to be nice from now on. No, I mean, they clearly went and screwed you over. They're going to still maximize that data and can make it available to competitors, or if your company is up to anything illegal, they can report it to the government, and you can create a lot of downstream effects.
Yes. The cost of having your servers in your server closet really are higher than 20,000 typically. And the ransomware starts around that 20 to 50 grand. And it's definitely worth paying that. Like when you do the math on it, you're like, okay. And Rui and I have been at some places where the first attempt, the person in charge of finance pays right away, and then they get the data back right away, right? And if you don't, there's like a scaling, tiering, escalation for if you don't respond within 48 hours, then it will double. It's better to just, and they got back, I would say, 80%, 90% of the data. Offsite storage that's disconnected from the current network sometimes saves the day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but don't you have to do, if you're a busy business, you kind of do that every day and have a process, right?
Correct.
Right.
Yes, and a documented process, and hopefully an audited documented process that is compliant with, SOX and ISO and other standards that have gone through this rigmarole and have like, here's what you do. Like grandfather, father, son, at least is like a great backup, I guess, algorithm.
But
But
that still
there's
takes
still
resources,
risks.
and small businesses can't afford that kind of a process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Talking about ISO and these other standards. I mean,
Yeah.
are you seeing it more? Again, you guys see this a lot more professionally, but are you seeing it affect small businesses more than large, or just across the board?
It seems to be affecting small businesses more than large. It affects medium-sized business. So I would classify medium as over 10 million annual sales. And if you have an AR and AP department, that's how I'm classifying medium-sized
It's a good
business.
classification. I like that.
It seems to hit them the most. It does not seem to hit enterprise the most. And it does not seem to hit enterprise publicly traded companies.
Do you think that's part of the targeting algorithm that these ransomware attackers use? Like they're not going to go after the little guy because they're not going to have the money to pay, but the mid-sized company doesn't have the organizational maturity and those extra layers and processes and certifications, but does have the
Absolutely.
revenue where they can make that payment.
100%. Like, never thought about that. The way you said that was so succinct, and 100%. That's one of the reasons why. Like, you don't go after the big guys because they probably got a process to mitigate such.
So
You don't go after the small guys because you can't afford it.
yeah, Rui, you're probably. I want your take on this. Like to that point, like if you're a company and you have a public facing website, something like that, let's assume somebody's going to do a little research on you. Are there ways of maybe like the
The
bully in the
Matrix.
playground, right? You puff yourself up, you look bigger than you really are. It may like deter them, right? If you have certain statements or things in your header that show good data security practices that might push them off a bit. You still want to have, I mean, if you don't have the actual protection layers, you got to work on that. But
So I think you're asking about a publicly facing website. I think that's what he was asking, right?
Yes. Yeah. So what would be
Ways to mitigate risk.
Yeah, like especially let's say you have some older versions of let's be honest here. Majority of the internet public facing websites are like
PHP.
PHP and WordPress. Like WordPress dominates
Right.
the market, right? jQuery is still pretty high in terms of what's out there. Like, but what would you do to like secure and make sure that those things are maintained and updated? Like for PHP.
Yeah. Yeah. So stuff like that, you would of course follow best practices when it comes to security, and always stay up to date, right? Like PHP goes out of date pretty frequently. I mean, not that as frequently as other technologies, but goes out of date and things get deprecated. So always stay up to date with the latest framework or a platform, right? So that is
Right.
probably the best way to stay secure, stay up to
And
date.
if you're a like low tech and what you're hearing from like when nerds like us speak, I'm not
algorithm
lumping you in
soup,
that.
yeah.
Algorithm soup is like they're like, oh, we have websites, we have internet websites, and that person no longer works for us. Every business as usual continue on, and then they lose everything. They didn't even see it coming.
Yeah.
How do you get through to people that are maybe older, maybe same age, but just low tech,
Yeah.
and they run big organizations?
I found that outlining the risks, like just making them aware the risks even exist, right? You say ransomware, you might think of all the stories of like the gift card scams, things like the phishing attacks, and they're very different things. Like
Mhm.
ransomware is a very direct attack on your server or your data. Whereas the other ones are just taking advantage of someone making a mistake and clicking the wrong link. It's a big difference. So
But
so
Yep.
again, it can happen anywhere, right? You're talking like physical, no problem, right? They can install ransomware and ransom your data, but cloud storage or cloud, it's the same thing, right? Any kind of misconfigured settings opens you up for attack, right? So it all comes down to knowing what to do and knowing how to prevent this, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but this goes back to the cloud. With regards to the cloud, like if your root database is in a secured Azure, AWS, I'm going with the big guys, but
Yeah.
it's in there. I mean, do you need to put additional layers on top of that for your organization?
It's only as secure as the person securing it. That's how I see it.
Yes. And they recently kind of started biasing and saying the people that are securing Azure SQL are now Microsoft, not the people that own the instance. And this was fairly recent, where if you go to Azure right now and say new Azure SQL database, maybe this is in the past 3 years, it automatically sets up like geo-specific redundant daily backups. You don't have an option. It automatically sets up TDE or, data encryption at rest. So if someone gets the database file itself and they open it on, their own computer, they can't, because the file at rest, a resting file, it can't be opened. So they've created some biased defaults that you have to go pretty out of your way to turn off the backups and to turn off TDE or data encryption. It used to be more like that, Rui, and now they're saying, you know what, people are stupid. And I would agree with Microsoft's opinion on people setting up and securing servers, because they see all of this stuff at a massive fire hose level, and they see all of these different things happening all the time and all these people affected and data leaks and stuff. So they know that, okay, 90% of the things happen from this, we're going to make that the default. And they bias in the install of things now, which is great. Takes the thinking out of setup, Yeah,
right. It's not all stupidity, though. I think you made a good point before, Logan, about like, how do you educate the people that don't understand or can't read the algorithm soup, right?
Yeah,
may not just understand these things. A smaller company or a mid-sized companies, we defined it before, like can't afford the resources to even know or parse all this. Are there resources or ways that they could educate themselves at a basic level, at least, or they go to this website and they can judge, or hire a service that can assess it without having to break the bank? Like, how do you vet a company like that too?
Yeah, exactly. It's trust with security is, and then if that security company gets hacked, pen tests or penetration tests are extremely expensive, $20,000 a pop or whatever, at least. Then there's all sorts of different layers, from, network to file storage to cloud to usernames and passwords being stored in plain text on people's sticky notes directly on their laptops, so I can log into my banks or whatever. Security versus convenience is always a battle.
Mm-hmm.
So penetration testing, that's a good one. Go ahead, Rui. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Chris.
No, I was just like, what else? What other options besides penetration testing?
So if you go to securityheaders.com and you type in your website, like if you do chriskreuter.com in securityheaders.com, it'll tell you if you have good security in terms of security headers. All of the websites, we set up is like A+, which is higher than Walmart. It's higher than all the other companies. It's literally just a tiny little bunch of config lines that you have to set up when you're setting up websites. That's a free service out there, securityheaders.com. Type in your website and see what letter you get. Other free resource. I think the other point that, Chris raises, like, how do you inform the low tech of this? Like, they wouldn't be searching for this topic, right?
Right.
That's like, I think, how do you even tell them? You have to almost run into random companies, run all the way to the top floor and say, hey, you don't know me, but here's the cost of losing everything. And I did this all for free. And here's a piece of paper. I don't want anything. You could ignore it, or you could do something about it. Either way, you're informed. Mm-hmm. Because I feel like Chris's point is CEOs that are low tech will not be looking until it's too late.
I know we talked about like small companies or medium-sized companies where they're targeting, but if you remember back maybe 7 years ago, there was a ransomware called WannaCry. Do you remember that?
Oh
No.
yeah, I remember hearing about this.
It was a ransomware, and I think it cost something around like $8 billion globally. So it targeted Windows machines, users' Windows machines. It found an exploit and demanded Bitcoin for everybody's machine that was locked. So I'm assuming they targeted companies' servers. But the point is, Windows allowed this to happen. The exploit was not on the user at this time, right? It was on Windows. The security should have been patched before ransomware got there, right?
Yeah. And there was a recent one with the airports, right? All the Windows.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That was CloudStrike, wasn't it?
Yeah.
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 I think that there's always going to be a path where, like, listen, they're always going to be maybe one step ahead. There's going to be these global outages. It's not like we're going to come up with a situation that's going to be secure forever.
Mm-hmm.
I think I think collectively now as much ransomware is out there, I think we're more secure now than we were 10, 20, 30 years ago. To some extent. I mean, there's something to be said about like the old school like missile silos that are like 5.25 discs that like don't connect to the internet. Like you go almost super low tech is better than in the cloud. But besides from that like extreme example, I mean, I think things for the most part are more secure, more redundant. People are more savvy to this stuff at a basic level than they were 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But I think the pace is still outstripping maybe even IT departments at a lot of companies.
Well, you think about it, companies don't want to make cars that run forever. You don't want to make a car that just keeps on running. What you want is a car that periodically breaks down so you can make money from service. So in other words, who knows where these ransomware exploits came from? They came from the engineers who built that in the first place, created a path to the exploit to be exploited, and then created a workaround to fix it. It's like the people who make antivirus software make the viruses too, right?
Yes,
that's
very John McAfee style kind of like craziness, but it's true a lot of the times. And a lot of the times, like what buddy of ours, Dimitri, said is like they'll always find a way if they want to. You can't really secure anything. You can just make it difficult enough that they kind of like, oh, well, they got like these 4 layers. I'll move on to the next one. But if they want to get in, like if they don't like you or what you did, they will find a way. This stuff is not, this is a Jenga house of bits and bytes.
It goes back to the deflecting the bully on the playground before he punches you in the nose, right? It's I'm not the guy you want to mess with. You can go the kid picking his nose right over there. Just better target. But
and now with the advent of AI, good luck, man. It's going to be a lot easier to get into these things, right? But you don't need humans now to process that. And
Rui, I liked your point before, but at the same time, like, the car example, right? It's the new cars now have more bells and whistles and features and greater safety than the cars that were made 10 years ago and 20 years ago, right? So there's also improvements that come along with that. So
we'll have to
I just say that to say that I think that there's a need for companies to
oh yes. Okay. So we can finish him off is because the new cars now have more features and bells and whistles, so they're more complex. Therefore, more things can go wrong. Yes. The response to that is simplicity, reduction, minimalism, tech minimalism, removing things, not adding. When you get a code review and you're like, oh, there's like 5 files added. Maybe it should be 5 files removed. Right. Like, what is the net effect of the change? Have we reduced the technical debt? Yeah. Reducing technical debt is often more secure than increasing technical debt.
Oh, for sure, man. 100%. Yeah. I agree with that. That right there sums everything up, right? Reducing technical debt.
Yes. Yeah. So do you really need to have 5 different social medias that could all get hacked? Like, you could have one. You could have none.
Yeah, you could have none. Hey, Chris, so you were saying about cars, bells and whistles?
Yeah, no, it's the cars now are better than they were 10 years ago, and they'll be better 10 years from now. Greater safety features and things like that. But I get your point too. You don't want to have to keep buying a new car, but I think we're at the point now, because these technologies are going to be ever evolving. I think companies have to make sure that they budget a certain amount to continuously improve.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes.
You can go and pay $20,000 to get that penetration testing done. You can hire an outside firm and do a one-time consultation, but you're fixing the problem at that point in time. But I think you continuously budget for this now in this day and age. If you do business using computers or be online, you should be doing this.
It
or
has to be.
make a regular investment in that in cloud storage and cloud tools.
Yep. It'd be better to hire someone that does, let's say someone that does penetration tests looking for a job. You hire them at 1 hour a day, but full time, you have like a 10-year commitment, whatever. And they're actively doing what they do for an hour a day. Because your example is perfect, Chris. Imagine you just cleaned your entire house, okay? The 1st of January. And then you completely destroy the place for a year. By the time you get to the end of the year, you're going to be like, well, we just cleaned it at the beginning of the year. That's like a penetration test, so to speak, because this stuff evolves like crazy. It's like at the time, it was great. But because we didn't actively invest in continuous improvement into security, IT, and we didn't keep up with the trends. Therefore, we lost X amount of millions of dollars due to Y amount of reasons.
Yeah, but if you clean a room and then you open the door and let the child back in, it's going to be messed up by January 2nd.
Yeah. Yep.
Sorry, I had to use the example. But
yeah, that's true. And the child would be like, I don't know, people that are uneducated and just clicking links in emails. Hey, do you want to eliminate phishing attacks? Just eliminate emails from your company. I know it sounds radical, but there's books written on it, good books. Chris gave me one, and you could just send all the emails to Teams, and then you can triage as tickets. Yes, you can respond in Teams, and a workflow picks it up and sends an email. But you don't have a low-tech clicking a link with admin access to their Windows machine, downloading a ransomware. The ransomware looks in my computer. It looks at the shared drives. Oh, this person has admin access to this. I'll encrypt all of this. And now I send an email with that person's stuff, and now you pay 20 grand. Phishing can lead to ransomware. I think it's probably the very high.
Sorry, we're talking about ransomware and phishing and everything else. But there's also corporate espionage here. I think it's safe to assume that every company has had their information stolen by somebody or has sitting on a server somewhere. May not be getting exploited, or you may not be aware it's getting exploited. But this has got to be a real thing, not just at the government level for CIA or whatever you have in Canada, right? This is happening on a corporate level, whether you think it is or not. It may not be happening to you, but I think it's fair to assume you are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree.
It's just 10 times bigger, more complicated, and more money in the US compared to Canada. And you guys are way more advanced in many different ways. However, to our advantage, we have this framing. We can do things more simply. Like the processes are more mature and evolved and backed by several different layers.
Assuming you're not doing business in multiple countries too.
Yeah. Then you're just, it's crazy because then you deal with, okay, I don't know. It's before when you recently, when it cut out, we talked about minimizing tech or reducing things that you use, technical debt. If you minimize technical debt, you minimize your footprint for security risks. Okay. Mm-hmm. You don't have 5 different accounts for whatever. You don't have, multiple computers have a different password on every site. And how do you do that? And remember, take the first 3 letters of whatever you're logging into, then whatever you typically have as a password, and then 5 symbols at the end. Because length of passwords, it trumps complexity. So entropy trumps complexity. Like you can look at Haystacks, which is from Security Now, Steve Gibson. He kind of proved in a white paper-ish website kind of thing that the longer your password, it does trump complexity. Length trumps complexity. So now you have a different password on every single site.
And a lot of these, they limit the length of your password. So you can't even get that complex. You're just telling them how you're giving
between
these
8 and 16 characters. That seems to be the common trend.
Yeah, let me do 50. How much more is it really adding to your server load to have?
You have to change the database. What is it? the field size.
Yeah.
And
But how
that's
much does that
Right.
actually impact the company providing the service, right? Like,
Right. Probably nothing.
but
Like at the
there's
end of the day,
motivations but it's a great point. Like there's motivations for the companies supplying these platforms to keep their costs down.
for
Right.
sure. If you're logging into a website and it says your password must be shorter than this, I'm pretty safe to say that you shouldn't be using that service.
Yeah, but if you're auditing your company, let's say you get the penetration testing, right?
Yeah.
They're not doing the testing on all of your other providers, whether that be a cloud-based tool.
Yeah.
You could be doing, what are the popular? You have a chat program, you can have a database program, you can have an online collaboration space.
Mhm.
They're not going to test all these different ones. And a breach in one, that's the infection vector for everything.
Yes. And like Log4j, I'm not sure if you heard about that. It was like a dependency of dependencies, meaning like, I would say like majority or more than 50% of all the JavaScript libraries out there on NPM had like a reference or a dependency on Log4j. And then it was because everything had a dependency on that thing and that thing had the exploit, everything was exploited.
Yeah.
So the other reducing technical debt is try to not have dependencies. It's like a human example would be if you're going to go into corporate espionage, like Mission Impossible style with like guns and stuff, you probably don't want to have a family because if you have dependents, they come for your family. You got to be like a solo person. And in the world of computing, you shouldn't rely on so many different packages because if one of those packages has an exploit, then your code has an exploit and you get blamed. So try to write all the code yourself if it's cost effective and you have the time and the support from management and IT and its best practices and so on and so forth. There's no right answer because they'll still find a way. It's just minimize.
What do you think about like that kind of security, ransomware, and outsourcing jobs to outside of your location? What do you think about that? Is there any correlation? Like you're outsourcing to overseas, maybe thousands of miles away, to places where the law is not up to par.
Yeah.
Would that be a
Like some
factor?
Cisco routers and stuff, they block like certain countries by default because they just get inundated with like DDoS attempt and traffic from certain IP ranges.
Yeah.
But I think it's a lot of times you're outsourcing and the main reason for that is cost, but you need to do a full assessment of the hidden costs, right? Or the risk. If you're comfortable saying, okay, we're going to save $1 million on labor doing this, but you're going to create this much technical debt, which would cost us this much to fix it or have this damaging impact because it's a dependency, as Logan had put it. I don't think people are going to that level of depth and understanding when they're making these decisions.
Right.
Yeah. Plus, like, no one wants to talk to that person at a party that's like the risk assessment person. They're like, this guy's boring, right? He's not cool. He's not like saying we're going to save $1 million in labor. Like the sales rep that's saying that, they're like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's hard for them.
If you're a corporate communications person and you're going through an earnings report, it's all about short term. Like here's how many widgets we sold. Here's our revenue. Here's our profit. But there could be another company B could be saying, well, we didn't make as much revenue and profit, but we're this much more secure, right? We've invested in this, and our risk is a lot lower. Like we don't value that, I think, as a society as much as we probably should.
Yes,
you only get the high profile breaches after the fact, and then oh man, the stock price plummets.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if you're making investments too, consider that when you make on a personal level or as a business, right?
Yep. So for a company that happened to tune into RansomWARE podcast out of nowhere, Rui, what would be the top 3 things before we end today's episode for, random medium-sized business tunes into the podcast, skips to the end. What's the top 3 things that they can do today that low barrier entry, said simply, and they can do today?
Man, top three. I can't think of 3, but I can tell you one, and that is keep AI out of the business. Keep it away as much as you can, because once they start kind of allowing that to, take root, it will, the exploits are going to come. And on top of that, it will eventually be AI exploits versus AI versus AI. It's going to be a war of attrition. Basically, there'll be people manning that. It'll be insane, but keep it away. Keep AI away from your business is my only advice when it comes to this.
Chris, what about you from a business perspective and a technical perspective?
I would bring the entire company together and say, hey, we need to make a concerted effort to reduce our technical debt and build up a better protection against ransomware, malware, all the phishing attacks. This is going to be a long process, but one the company's committed to. It's going to cost us time, energy, money, and we're all going to have to educate. But here is why we're doing it. Yeah, I think the why is just so important in that.
Yeah,
on the technical side, I would come up with a complete assessment. Like, who are all your your technology vendors? I mean, you can go very deep with this, as you should, but at a surface level, like what programs, what software you're using, make a list. You just in the making of a list, you're going to see just how bad the problem could be. How many dependencies do you have? Right? Go count your kids. How many are you letting into the house? They're bringing their friends, and then they're going to bring their friends, and before you know it, you've got a complete rager, and you've got all your alcohol's gone. So, Did I kill the analogy enough for you?
No, that's perfect. That reminds me of a party I didn't know I was hosting in Meadowvale when I was a kid.
That story on the next episode of
yeah, exactly. It's I was like, my parents get home and they're like, all the booze is gone. I was like, did someone have a party? I was like, it was just you here. I was like, must have been a good party. It's like stop joking about something serious, Logan. You're blah blah blah. Go to your room, etc. My, I guess, 3 tips, if I could, or just 1 tip to complete the 3, would be maybe I'll try for 3. The password algorithm everyone can do today. You can have a different password on every single site today, and you will not forget it. It's easy. Okay.
I use 1 password and highly recommend it. I think that's a really great tip, Logan.
If you're tech savvy enough, use 1Password or Bitwarden, which is a better version of LastPass. Don't use LastPass. Use 1Pass or Bitwarden. Just don't store your passwords in a place where people can see them. Sticky note or digital sticky note, text file. Number 2 would be to keep backups in the cloud if you're on-prem, and offsite disconnected as a 3rd. So you have offsite cloud, and then you also have offsite disconnected. So if there's, let's say, a natural disaster at your organization, the offsite one will work or the cloud offsite will work. And the 3rd one would be just echoing Chris's point of minimizing technical debt and coming up with a list of things that you have, and maybe sort those list of things based on what people like using as well, I would say. Because if you can create a happy work environment that has less dependencies, you're going to have less turnover, higher retention, higher profits, and lower security risk score. And
I realized that my advice was a bit lackluster, but I did a video on how to encrypt files and keep the key in a cold storage. So if anybody wants to watch that, basically demonstrates how you can secure the files on your machine in case you do want to have your passwords in a file. Then just put the key in a cold storage USB, and nobody can access that.
Yeah, we'll put the link in the show notes. That's a great.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you happen to see this on YouTube, we'll put the link in the description. We'll also link back to Chris's channel on YouTube and Rui's Written Pixel channel on YouTube, where you can find these resources. I'm Logan Dunning. This is Chris and Rui. We thank you for your time today and wishing you the most secure and safe world out there. The only thing you should be scared of is kids still calling on your door asking for candy at midnight. It's like, aren't you supposed to be in bed? Not losing everything about your business. Thank you very much. See you guys.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.